In the rugged jungles of Bolivia in 1967, far from the streets of Havana and the global spotlight, a secret mission was unfolding. A mission that would not only change the course of Latin American history, but also bring an end to the revolutionary path of one of the most iconic figures of the 20th century, Ernesto Che Guevara. What happened in Bolivia was no accident. It was the result of a highly coordinated effort involving the Bolivian military, the CIA, and a growing fear in Washington that Guevara's brand of revolution could spread far beyond Cuba. Che Guevara, the Argentine doctor turned guerrilla fighter, had risen to international fame after the Cuban Revolution of 1959. Alongside Fidel Castro, he had helped topple the Batista regime and establish a socialist government in Cuba. But Che was never content with revolution in just one country. He believed in exporting the revolutionary model throughout Latin America and beyond. For Che, the Cuban victory was just the beginning. After holding prominent positions in the Cuban government, including Minister of Industries and President of the National Bank, Che became increasingly restless. Bureaucracy and statecraft weren't his passions. By the mid-1960s, he vanished from public life, sparking rumors of his death. But Che had not disappeared. He was preparing for his next campaign, to ignite revolution in Bolivia, which he saw as a strategic location to spark uprisings across South America. What Che didn't know, or perhaps underestimated, was that his every move was being monitored. The CIA had kept tabs on Guevara since the Cuban Revolution. They viewed him as a serious threat, not just because of his military capabilities, but because of his charisma, his ideology, and his symbolic power. In Washington, the fear was that, if left unchecked, Che could become a lightning rod for anti-American sentiment and guerrilla movements across the hemisphere. When Guevara arrived in Bolivia in late 1966 under a false identity, he began organizing a guerrilla group deep in the Nyancahuazu jungle. The plan was to slowly build support among the local population, train a cadre of fighters, and launch a prolonged insurgency. But things did not go as planned. The Bolivian peasants were wary of the foreign fighters. Supplies were scarce. And perhaps most importantly, the Bolivian government had been tipped off. With help from the CIA, Bolivian intelligence began tracking Guevara's group. The CIA provided communication support, aerial reconnaissance, and even training for elite Bolivian ranger units. A small team of CIA operatives, including the now infamous Felix Rodriguez, was deployed to assist the Bolivians on the ground. What many don't realize is that the elite Bolivian ranger unit responsible for capturing Guevara had just completed training from U.S. Green Berets, part of a broader Pentagon initiative known as the Mobile Training Team Program. The 2nd Ranger Battalion, a relatively inexperienced group before 1967, underwent an intensive 19-week course in counterinsurgency tactics just months before confronting Che's guerrillas. This training, carried out quietly in Santa Cruz, was a direct response to fears that Latin America could become the next major front in the Cold War. Rodriguez, a Cuban exile, had deep personal motivation to stop Guevara. He saw him not only as a political threat, but as a symbol of the revolution that had cost many Cubans their homes, families, and lives. As the months dragged on, Che's group suffered a series of devastating losses. They were ambushed repeatedly. Communications failed. Morale dropped. The Bolivian army, now emboldened and better trained, began closing in. In early October 1967, Guevara's group was finally surrounded in a ravine near the village of La Higuera. On October 8th, Che was captured alive after a brief skirmish. He was taken to a small schoolhouse in La Higuera, where he was held overnight. Reports from those present suggest that Che was defiant, even in captivity. He refused to beg for his life. According to witnesses, he told his captors, "I know you've come to kill me. Shoot, coward. You're only going to kill a man." What happened next remains a subject of debate. Officially, the Bolivian government claimed that Guevara was killed in combat, but declassified documents and eyewitness testimonies confirm that he was executed the following day, on October 9th, on orders from high up. The CIA has long maintained that it did not give the order, but Rodriguez was present and reportedly communicated with Washington before the execution. After his death, Che's body was put on display to the press in the nearby town of Vallegrande. The photographs taken that day are haunting. Che lies on a stretcher, his eyes open, a slight smile on his face, almost Christ-like in appearance. Whether intentional or not, the image transformed him from a guerrilla fighter into a martyr. The Bolivian authorities hoped that displaying his body would crush the revolutionary spirit. Instead, it did the opposite. In the years that followed, Che Guevara became a global symbol. His face, immortalized in a photograph by Alberto Corda, would be printed on posters, T-shirts, murals, and banners around the world. The very operation designed to eliminate him had, in many ways, cemented his legacy. The remains of Che Guevara were buried in a secret grave near Vallegrande. For decades, his burial site was unknown. It wasn't until 1997, 30 years later, that a team of forensic experts, with help from Cuban and Bolivian officials, located his remains and returned them to Cuba. Today, Che rests in a mausoleum in Santa Clara, the city he liberated during the Cuban Revolution. The story of Che Guevara's final days is more than a tale of military pursuit. It's a complex episode that raises enduring questions. How far should nations go to suppress ideologies they oppose? Can eliminating a person truly silence an idea? And what happens when a man becomes more powerful in death than in life? The CIA's role in Che's capture and execution is still discussed in political and academic circles. Some argue it was a necessary measure in the context of the Cold War. Others see it as an example of foreign intervention that backfired. What is undeniable is that the events of Bolivia in 1967 left a lasting impact. Che's fate in Bolivia also foreshadowed a darker period to come across South America. Just a few years later, the region would be swept by Operation Condor, a coordinated campaign of political repression carried out by right-wing dictatorships with U.S. backing. Bolivia's handling of Guevara, with its reliance on military intelligence and covert foreign support, served as an early example of how Cold War logic would justify extreme measures in the name of anti-communism. For supporters of Che, he remains a symbol of resistance, anti-imperialism, and revolutionary spirit. For his critics, he is a cautionary tale about ideology taken to extremes. And for the world, his story is a reminder that sometimes the most powerful weapon a revolutionary can wield is not a rifle, but a legacy. If you found this story as powerful as it is overlooked, consider giving it a like and subscribing to the channel. Here, we bring back the stories history tried to forget.